Hello, everybody. Welcome to Shame to Shine. I am so pleased to be here today with Kat Bruno, who is the founder of Babesburgh, which is a local Pittsburgh community for women and for lovers of women to support women-owned businesses and women events. It's so awesome, and I'm hoping that it spreads to your area if you're not in Pittsburgh by the time you see this, because it's just an awesome organization. So knowing that Kat is the founder of that, there's a lot of fierceness and radiance that she has to share. So thank you again, Kat, for coming on to the series.
Oh, thanks for having me. This is great.
We are going to dive right in, knowing that Shame to Shine, this whole series is all about feeling less alone and feeling like it is actually possible to transform the shame energy that some of us feel, and even to use it when we change our orientation of how we see ourselves, to use it into a force for good and even a force for connection and compassion for others. So that being said, Kat, will you share with us what is the initial shame or the story that you used to be in that you have since transitioned from that you're going to be sharing today?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it touches on a lot of those different aspects in different ways, which is really interesting. It's kind of seems like, universal growth for a lot of us. And I certainly had that. Um, 3 years ago, my life changed both personally and professionally. My ex-fiance and I ran a business together. The relationship ended. We tried to work together for another year. That was a fairly difficult year for both of us. So in that initial transition, my professional life was changing. I couldn't figure out what I was going to do next. I was leaving the company. Um, Personally, I was in a pretty low place. We had been together for a decade. I have two daughters. One was in college, one had just moved out. So, I just found myself in this place where everything I'd known a month before was completely different. A
Mm.
month later, my job was different. Um, I was now single, and I was kind of an empty nester at that point. It was just my dog and I in the house. So it was coming upon fall. It was, days were getting shorter, nights were getting longer, and I spent probably 3 months watching a lot of TV, sitting in the living room. Just, it kind of was, in hindsight at the time, I don't think I felt this, but in hindsight now, it feels like it was very much, that wintry season. Um, I was just hibernating. I was in that season of my life where um, it was just kind of a very down period. Didn't really know what was around the corner. Sometimes in those long nights, it feels like spring's never going to come. It's never going to be sunny again. And I think I was really in that place, both physically and emotionally. So it was a very difficult time, probably one of the most difficult times in my life, if not the most difficult. And what comes with that is I've always considered myself a very strong woman, a very independent woman. I uh, very much respect and support women. It's just, I have sisters, I have daughters. I think women are kind of the backbone of society. So, and strong women. So I think that's where my shame really was, that I was not in that place. I was weak. I was disappointed in myself. I didn't know why I couldn't just move on, or, get over him, or, find a new job, because I'm, you know, educated and compassionate and had a ton of time on my hands. So why couldn't I figure out my next steps? And that self reckoning took me several months. It took me medication. It took me therapy. It took so much introspection and um, self-acceptance, I think was ultimately where I ended up. And meditation, I'd never really meditated before. And with your help, it really kind of allowed me to take some time with myself and my thoughts and examine them from a different angle. I've always had, inner monologue, and I always thought that I knew myself well, but this was I guess, a side of me that I never knew. So it took a lot of examination and, a lot of time. And it was finally when I started being more patient with myself and more accepting that, we're not strong all the time and we're not the person we want to be all of the time. Um, and that's okay. I think that by getting to a place where I hadn't been before, and you hear all the sayings, how you have to experience things to learn, you have to experience pain to grow, or change to grow, and that's all true, but it's so difficult to understand and internalize in the moment. I think it's really with hindsight that we say, oh, that was a moment that I really changed. So yeah, when I was in it, it wasn't, oh, I need to get through this, I got this, I'm going to be so much better on the other side. It was, how do I get to the other side?
Yeah.
um, and I did, but it took work. It took work on myself, and you know I think that I have so much more compassion because it had to start with myself. Self forgiveness allows you to see other people in such a different way, and it examines yourself on really deep levels. And there's some of us, and me included, this was, I think, one of my major flaws, is that you can kind of hide your head in the sand about things around you or yourself. And I kind of just kept moving on, and didn't allow myself to look at those parts of me that needed work and had needed work. So I think when I started to, it was like, looking in the mirror and seeing someone I didn't know, I didn't recognize. Um, and then trying to figure out what I was going to do with that. And I got stuck there for a while, and I think that I'm still stuck there days now. It's not all of a sudden you're cured. I think everyone's kind of a work in progress, but just allowing myself that time to examine who I had been, who I wanted to be, who I was in the moment. Um, I, I I think that I became a lot less judgmental afterward to other people and their stories. Um, more compassionate, kind of um, accepting, and I think that I needed to grow there. Maybe I wasn't always that way, so it was. I think that a lot of times our own internal conflict has such an influence on our relationships and our interactions with everyone around us. And I didn't realize until, I started the work, that I had a lot of internal conflict and I was very ill at ease. So I think, that was, realizing that is shocking and disappointing in yourself and sad. But once you get through it, it's so powerful, and it's such a um, it's such an important step on our journey to kind of have that season of winter, excuse me, um, and just pause and figure out, how do we get to that spring. So yeah, I mean, it's a few years later, and I started a organization out of out of that eventually. I had a lot of people around me, women, sisters, friends, my daughters. I had so much support, which was great and necessary. I still had to do the work. That you can support someone as much as you want. I think any individual really has to do their work themselves. But once I started doing that and looked around, I wanted to start something new professionally, and I realized that I was lucky to have so many great women around me, intelligent, compassionate, interesting, diverse, eclectic tastes. And I recognized that I was really lucky to have that, but not everybody is.
Mhm.
So we just started an organization where women got together for fun events. Anything, and we're still doing that. It can be a fitness event, a wellness event, a yoga class, a chakra meditation class. We do a lot of crafting events, and at the base of it all is just trying to get women together and people who support women. We have lots of different people at our events, in a very safe and social environment. Might talk to someone for a night, it might lead to something more, but just kind of creating a community of women in a very um, fun and relaxed way that isn't, we didn't want it to be, the kind of networking event or space where, you felt intimidated to come or you had to have certain accomplishments to be there. We just wanted it to be like a super welcoming and space. Um, so yeah, I think that we're continuing to work on doing that, and um, it's helped me along the way because it gets me out of the house and it gets me going places and meeting new people and hearing different stories. And that's, I think that's what's most exciting for me is meeting new women. Some come to our events by themselves, which is always really impressive to me and really humbling to me that are like, you know what, I'm going to come to this event by myself. So yeah, we're just going to continue that. And I guess that's where the shine comes in, that we're trying to create a space. You don't have to be there. I'm not there every day where I'm shining by any means. Um, but giving you a reason to kind of say, hey, um, there's something past this pain, let me go, even if it's just for a night, have a good time or meet some new people and hear other stories.
Wow. I love that. And I feel so fortunate to be a part of Babesburg and have participated as on both ends of be facilitating events and then also showing up and enjoying events. And it really is that vibe. And it's really striking me right now how you are telling your story because I, having known you the past few years, saw the evolution of going from that place of feeling really alone and having a lot of transition and having this your identity shaken up where
Mm-hmm.
that is so much transition at once, a breakup and kids moving out, graduating college and moving out and having losing your job because it's tied into your relationship. So just an incredible amount of change. And then how you integrated that to create a place of community building where there is that embedded sense of compassion and understanding and desire to connect. And so, and yet it's really, really powerful hearing it in your words in going from that season of winter to the season of spring, because you're so right that when you're in the moment, it feels so lonely and it can feel like no one else, not that like no one else is capable of understanding, but just that no one else could really understand or might feel the same way. And yet when you come out of it and then are able to create opportunities for that connection, you do that of giving people a place to have community so that we remember we're not alone because we often do heal in relationship. So that it's just so incredible to hear this story from your perspective. And I am really curious, since you talked about the self-acceptance piece, I'm really curious how that how that came about for you of like what happened or what changed internally for you to feel like I do accept myself as I am, even though we know it's not a 0 to 100 flip, but just where there's enough of a switch where the default is more on the compassion and understanding side to self.
So I think that that's, you know, self-acceptance comes in so many different ways for so many different people. We all have that part that we might not face or might not like. Um, for me, I think it was just so much frustration with myself that, I couldn't, emotionally, I was still very much tied to my past relationship and I couldn't figure out why. Um, and to my ex, I was like, why can't I just move on? Why am I still in this place? And I struggled with that. And it wasn't until I kind of started coming at it from a different angle. And instead of fighting that, just being proud of myself that I was capable of such an immense amount of love and that it just didn't turn off like a switch. And really kind of, uh, I think that's what it is. It's kind of a perspective shift that instead of being mad at myself over, hey, I'm here, I'm in this space. Um, I want to stay in this space. I just said, you can stay in that space if you want, but know why you're there. And it's kind of, what the better to have loved than lost than to never loved at all. And again, easy to say, but I tried to just honor that and say, you know, it was deep, it was complicated. It clearly had a very strong and lasting effect on me. So relish in that was the path. And um, painful at times. Don't get me wrong, very, very painful. There were moments, and there are still moments now when I look at people where and whatever situation they're in that can kind of move on swiftly or disconnect with their thoughts or their feelings. And I envy that because that's not me, and it's never been me. And at times I wished it was like, oh, I wish I could turn this off. I wish I could forget this. I wish I could just erase that part of my life. Like that movie, Eternal Sunshine of the, I don't know. I always mess up the title, but just erase that from me. Um, and until you're like, that shapes you, that shaped me for who I am now. And it might have been like a really hard path to walk, but I'm here because of that path. I'm in this specific spot on my journey now because of those steps I took to get here. So, um, again, I think, but there's always space. I think it's such an imperfect walk. And I think that's probably the message I'd really want to get out is that even though I'm many steps from that place, I'm still sometimes looking back there. And sometimes I feel like I'm back there and I'm, feeling that pain again. And um, I think, you're never gonna, or at least for me, I was never gonna just completely recover in a way that that space no longer affects me. I think that I'm just trying to look at that differently and react differently to it. And that's something we work on daily. I think that it's that's why whatever practice you do to self-examine and heal and connect with yourselves, it has to stay part of your practice. I still meditate. I went from never meditating to nearly every day I'll meditate, and that's what helps me, just to kind of quiet my mind and kind of meet myself, to meet myself in my headspace. Um, so yeah, just continually trying to step forward, but also respecting that there might be moments where I'm back there, and that's okay too.
Yeah. I'm so glad you mentioned that. That has come up in all of the interviews, and it's so important because even the title of Shame to Shine, it can imply, oh, you can go from this like complete feeling of darkness to a complete feeling of light, when really what you're describing is there there can be a shift from seeing that darkness in you as bad, or seeing a behavior in you that put you in a vulnerable spot, to that you love someone so much or did love someone so much that it's really painful and difficult to let go. And see that in a way that's like, oh, actually, that is about me being really loving. And it almost feels like the wind blowing, like if when you have sun catchers or you have certain uh like kind of materials that look one way when the wind's blowing one way or the other, that it's the same quality, but it
Mhm.
can, when the wind blows, shift it to where it's reflecting light, but it's not like a light switch necessarily. In nature, things are more cyclical, and that sunshine might poke through the clouds, and then there are rays that are really bright,
Mhm.
but then there are rays that are still cloudy. So in nature, that is how it works, that there is never quite an all or nothing.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
yes, yes. And yet there is something to say for the journey of practicing the self-acceptance and being willing to look at yourself a new way. What would you, for for people who may feel like, then like, why even put any effort in to my own healing or to my own connection with community? What would you say makes it worth it to go on the imperfect journey?
I think for me, it has allowed a lot of my relationships to be in better places because I'm more at peace with myself. I think conflict creates more conflict that could be
Mhm.
around you internally. I was having a lot of internal conflict, and I think that that just put me in a space that created so much more external conflict that I was involved in um, because I wasn't at peace with myself. So I think that, you know, starting that journey, it will improve not just your relationship with yourself, that I think is such an important step and such an important thing to accomplish. Really, self-acceptance brings so much more peace than I think really much else. And then when you have that, I think that it allows you to shine more often. I think, we all find happiness in our own ways, and define it in our own ways and continue to search for it in our own ways. But it just kind of makes you feel lighter. It keeps you in the spring and summer season longer, and um, it's worth the work. It really is, and no matter how long it takes and how many times you have to redo it, um, I think that it just makes you feel better in the end, and it makes you feel more alive, uh, more at peace, more compassionate. And I think I love that idea when you were talking about the prism. Um, it's, when you visualize it, and I think that, it makes the prism chakra craft that we did so much more significant. When you look at a prism and all of the different angles to it and the way that it can reflect light and then the way you see it, I think that's how we are. Um, Nothing is black and white in life. People aren't. We are so complex and difficult and beautiful and passionate, and there's so many prism angles to us as people, um, that if one side you don't like of yourself or someone else, if you just look at that prism from a different angle, you might find something you like. So it's something that's shining and beautiful to you. So I think that's such a significant visualization that I love that you mentioned that. I think it's just beautiful.
Absolutely. It is beautiful. It is beautiful. Thank you for the inspiration. And really, what an amazing energy, like calm and also very, very creative. And there's a fierceness to you as well, where like you are a very strong woman. And I think in self-acceptance of the parts that are softer and more vulnerable, it adds even more strength. So I'm just so grateful to you for coming on. And for people listening who have not yet heard of Babesburgh and are local to Pittsburgh, there will be all the links to check out different Babesburgh activities. And I would love for you to share any final um, messages that can be specific to Babesburgh for the local Pittsburgh community or even for our audience members around the world. Any final like little nuggets about Babesburg you want to share, and then any general final messages as well.
Sure. I would say, if you're local, and you need somebody to share your story with, or just someone to talk to any given night, stop by an event. I'm at every event. Seek me out. I love listening to other people's stories, truly. Um, and I give advice if I can. If not, I will just listen. So the people that aren't local, we are Babesburg everywhere. All of those DMs get to my box at some point. So if you need someone to have a conversation with, I'm here. I think that friendship and sisterhood is really important. And if I can be that to you, then please reach out.
Thank you, Kat. Thank you, Kat. Thank you to Babesburg. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in to Shame to Shine.